For more than half a century, the name Hall and Oates was shorthand for an unbreakable partnership. They were the sound of an era, a seamless blend of Philadelphia soul, rock grit, and pop perfection that produced 6 #1 hits and sold over 80 million records. To the world, Daryl Hall and John Oates were the ultimate musical brothers, a duo so in sync that their very surname became a single cultural unit. But behind the harmony, a very different story was unfolding. Now, at 76, John Oates is breaking a long, careful silence, and his account directly challenges the narrative that has dominated headlines for the past 3 years, specifically, the accusation that he was the betrayer. Instead, Oates claims that his longtime partner systematically erased his contributions, weaponized the media, and ultimately orchestrated a campaign that left Oates' reputation in tatters. The public rupture began in November 2023, when Daryl Hall filed a lawsuit and a request for a restraining order against Oates and his trust. The initial news was shocking. Hall's legal filing, obtained by Billboard and Rolling Stone, accused Oates of the ultimate partnership betrayal. The trigger was Oates' plan to sell his share of their joint publishing company, Whole Oates Enterprises, to Primary Wave Music, a firm known for buying artist catalogs. Hall argued the sale was clandestine and executed in bad faith, timed deliberately to blindside him just before a solo tour. For most fans, the image was clear. John Oates was the greedy partner, trying to cash out behind his partner's back. But that framing, Oates now argues, is a deliberate distortion. In a series of candid interviews throughout 2025 and early 2026, including a lengthy conversation on The Zach Sang Show in September 2025, and subsequent press for his solo memoir, Change of Seasons, Oates presented a different timeline. He explained that the decision to sell his publishing rights was not impulsive. It was, in fact, a last resort after years of being marginalized within a partnership that, by its very branding, suggested equality. The name was Hall and Oates, Oates said, but in practice, it became Daryl Hall featuring John Oates, and that's not what I signed up for in 1970. To understand Oates' claim that Hall ruined his reputation, one has to look at the long, slow erosion of his public identity. Authentic sources confirm that Hall repeatedly emphasized his role as the frontman. In a 2025 interview with the Times of London, Hall was blunt. Even when we were a duo, we never operated as a duo. I was the frontman. It was more like Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. Oates would be back there, and I'd be doing everything up at the front. While Hall presented this as a simple fact, Oates sees it as a strategic diminishment. He points out that he co-wrote many of the duo's biggest hits, including Sarah Smile, She's Gone, and Out of Touch. He sang lead on classics like Possession Obsession and Did It in a Minute. Yet, in the popular imagination, fueled by Hall's own interviews and his long-running web series Live from Daryl's House, Oates became the mustachioed sideman, the affable guitarist in the background. The legal battle of 2023 to 2024, Oates claims, was the moment this private disrespect became a public character assassination. When Hall obtained a temporary restraining order from a Nashville chancellor, the news cycle exploded with headlines about betrayal. Oates was legally barred from selling his own assets. He was painted as a greedy, untrustworthy partner. But what those headlines often omitted was the outcome. In August 2025, after nearly 2 years of arbitration, the two men quietly settled. The terms were confidential, but Oates confirmed that the core of his plan, the separation of their business interests, was ultimately approved. Daryl and I have amicably agreed to separate our business interests, Oates stated. That's the bottom line. If his original move had been truly illegal or unethical, legal experts note, the court would not have allowed any version of it to proceed. So why did Hall fight so hard? Oates offers a compelling, if bitter, explanation. Control. He has always wanted to be seen as an individual first, Oates told The Guardian in early 2026. And for that to work, I had to be seen as less. Not as an adversary, but as an accessory. When Oates attempted to sell his share of the publishing to Primary Wave, He was not just making a financial decision. He was asserting his independent ownership of songs he helped create. For Hall, who has publicly stated he would never sell his publishing rights, calling such sales misguided, this was an intolerable breach of an unspoken hierarchy. Hall's legal filing even emphasized that Oates's move would cause tremendous upheaval, harm, and difficulty. But Oates notes dryly that the only real harm was to Hall's sense of unilateral authority. The reputational damage, however, was very real. Following the 2023 lawsuit, Oates noticed a shift in how he was perceived. Longtime fans questioned his loyalty. Promoters for his solo shows reported hesitant ticket sales, with some venues openly asking if he was the one who sued Daryl. Never mind that Hall had filed the suit, the narrative had flipped. When you're in a duo, the person who speaks first controls the story, Oates explained. Daryl spoke first, loudly, with words like betrayal and restraining order. I had to spend the next 2 years saying, "Wait, let me show you the whole picture." And the whole picture, according to Oates, includes Hall's own history of difficult professional relationships. Hall's former bandmates from his solo projects, as well as managers who have worked with the duo, have occasionally noted his demanding perfectionist streak. Oates is careful not to call it malicious, but he describes it as a deeply ingrained need to be the final arbiter of everything related to the brand. When Oates refused to accept that role any longer, when he insisted on treating their 50-year partnership as a 50-50 business rather than a benevolent dictatorship, the conflict became inevitable. Hall, for his part, has shown no remorse. In fact, he has doubled down. In his 2025 interviews, he laughed off the idea of missing Oates. "There isn't a time," he said. "There never was." He described performing alone as even better and a happier experience. These comments, while perhaps honest, reinforce the very reputation damage Oates laments. If Hall was happier alone, the public reason inferred, then Oates must have been the problem, a drag on Hall's brilliance. Oates counters that this is a revisionist history. "We sold 80 million records together," he says. "You don't do that if one person is just a prop. That success was alchemy, and you can't rewrite alchemy into a solo act after the fact." The financial aspect also undermines Hall's claim of betrayal. Primary Wave, the company Oates sought to sell to, is a legitimate major player in the music industry. It holds catalogs for legends like Stevie Nicks, Prince, and Bob Dylan. Selling one's publishing rights is no longer a fringe move. It is a standard, often savvy, retirement strategy for artists who want to liquidate a non-performing asset and secure their family's future. Oates was 74 at the time of the proposed sale. "I wanted to make sure that I could see through my creative life in a way that was completely unencumbered," he said. "That is not betrayal. That is estate planning." Yet the stain remains. In the court of public opinion, the man who files for a restraining order is often seen as the victim, and the man it is filed against as the aggressor. Oates argues that Hall weaponized the legal system not to stop a sale, but to send a message, "You are nothing without me." And the message was received. "My reputation took a hit because people thought I was trying to steal something that wasn't mine," Oates said. "But they were my songs, my work, my half. Wanting to control your own legacy isn't a scandal. It's called growing up." The final chapter of this story is still being written. The two men no longer speak. Hall has said the ship has gone to the bottom of the ocean, a metaphor Oates accepts with weary resignation. "That's fine," Oates says, "but I want the record to show that I didn't sink it. I just decided to build my own boat." At 76, John Oates continues to tour his solo music, write his memoir, and play the songs he co-wrote without Daryl Hall's permission or participation. And in those quiet moments on stage, playing Maneater to an audience that still claps for the riff he wrote, he offers his final rebuttal to the ruined reputation. He is still here. He is still playing, and he is still, undeniably, half of the greatest duo in history, whether Daryl Hall likes it or not.